I didn't just come here to turn water into wine. That's not my full purpose. I didn't just come here to heal the sick and raise the dead. No, he said this is not glamorous, this position that I'm in as Savior. He said I came to suffer, I came to die on a cross, and nobody will be saved. And the problem we have with some Christians today is that we are so focused on power, so focused on positions, that some of us forget our purpose. I wish I had a little bit more noise at 9:30. In other words,
we need it. A word to survive. Uplift. A word for the times. We need it. A word to survive. Uplift. A word for the times.
Ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to this thing we call prosperity, we as Christians have the propensity to look at things strictly from the vertical perspective. In other words, we see prosperity as a me and God thing. I follow God's principles and He prospers me accordingly. My family, my finances, my health, my spirituality. The tendency and the proclivity of the believer is to look at everything from a vertical perspective. But the truth that we have learned in previous series, and the truth that I've come to deliver today, is that prosperity in its truest form, while it may be vertical in principle, it is horizontal in practice. What do you mean, Pastor? I'm telling you that the truest measure of your prosperity is not just in your relationship with God. No, it is the manner in which you interact with people horizontally, the way you deal with people, the way you treat people, the way you talk to people, more specifically, people who are different than you. In a world that is still struggling to embrace diversity, it is Jesus who reveals to us how sectarianism and prejudice can cloud your perspective as a people. It's all right if I teach for a little while. It'll make the preaching make sense. Let me give it to you in context. By the time you get to verse 46, Jesus has just delivered a child who was vexed with a demon. Some of y'all remember this story. His daddy came to Jesus in verse number 40, and he said, Jesus, I brought my son to your disciples, but they couldn't do nothing about it. Talk to me here. And Jesus said, I guess if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. He said, oh, faithless and perverse generation, how long am I going to be here with y'all? How long am I going to be here to hold your hand? Jesus said, bring the boy to me. You know how the rest of it goes. He rebuked the unclean spirit. He healed the child and presented the child back to his father. And they were all amazed in verse 43 at the power of God. But while they marveled at what they had just seen, listen to what Jesus said. He said, let these sayings sink down in your ear, for the Son of Man shall be delivered into the hands of men. It's all right there in the text. And so you may wonder, as I wondered when I was looking at it, I said, what does that statement have to do with the miracle he just performed? He delivers the demon out of the child, gave the child back to his daddy, and then he goes into this soliloquy, if you will, and simply says that the Son of Man is going to be delivered to the hands of men. I need you to know that by announcing to his disciples that he would be delivered into the hands of men, that was a forecast of one Friday. That he would suffer one day and die for the sins of the world. How does that tie in? Because you need to understand that this miracle that y'all are marveling at this morning, he said, don't ever get so caught up in the power that you forget my purpose. I didn't just come here to turn water into wine. That's not my full purpose. I didn't just come here to heal the sick and raise the dead. No, he said, this is not glamorous, this position that I'm in as Savior. He said, I came to suffer, I came to die on a cross, and nobody will be saved unless I do it. And the problem we have with some Christians today is that we are so focused on power, so focused on positions that some of us forget our purpose. I wish I had a little bit more noise at 9:30. In other words, these disciples were delusional, and all they could see was what this miracle meant for them. Think about it. They like, yeah, we done hit pay dirt now. Jesus just healed a demon from this boy. Everybody gonna be following Jesus, so you know we gonna get some attention. Y'all don't see where I'm going. I'm trying to say, we rolling with Jesus. This the real deal here. We gonna be rock stars in every city we go. Because when people are following Jesus, they can't get to Jesus at one time. So you know some of them gonna come to us. So you know that this miracle is gonna pay off for all of us. They got so caught up in what Jesus had done and what it could possibly mean for them. Even when he talked about his purpose, the Bible says they were still focused on power. Verse 45 says they didn't understand the words that he was speaking. It was hidden from them, and they were afraid to ask him to explain what that statement meant. And if you're really wondering how clueless the disciples really were, all you got to do is look at verse 46. It says, even after all of that, there was reasoning among them about which one of them was going to be the greatest. Jesus just got through telling you, ain't nothing glamorous about this thing. And even after that revelation, they still fighting with each other over who going to be greatest. You want to know what the problem is with us? The problem with us is we got the nerve to seek authority even when we don't have ability. It's going to make sense in a minute. I said the problem with us is that we seek authority even when we lack ability. Watch me now. These disciples who just got exposed for not being able to help this boy. You mean tell me that they still sitting in there in Jesus' face trying to act important? All right, let's go the long way. The man just came to Jesus and said, I brought my son to your disciple. They couldn't do nothing. Jesus had to do it himself. And these same dysfunctional disciples fighting over power. They fussing about who gonna be the greatest, who gonna sit next to Jesus in the big chair, who gonna be the vice president, who gonna be the secretary of state, who gonna be the chairman. Seem to me like they all ought to go sit down somewhere because they've already been proven to be ecclesiastically impotent. Look, they are powerless. Verse 1 of chapter 9 says, and you need to go back and read it in context. Verse 1 of chapter 9 says that Jesus gave them power over demons, over sickness, gave them power over all manner of evil. But when the report came back, it is clear that their authority is absent from ability. The problem with us is we got leaders who want the accolades but don't want none of the accountability. Wish I had a witness here. Jesus said, you want to be great? Learn how to be like one of these children. Learn to be humble like a child. Don't be conceited. Don't be so full of yourself. Don't act as if the sun rises and sets on you. The way to go up is to come down. And the way to be great, you got to be a servant. Because another problem with us is that we've allowed our positions to make us prejudiced. It's going to be the best sermon I ever preach. After all that conviction, after all that correction from Jesus, these disciples still were oblivious to Jesus' instruction. John came to Jesus with the I'm telling face. Talking about, Master, we saw somebody casting out demons in your name. Watch this. And we stopped him because he wasn't with us. Oh, it's going to get heavier than that. He said, we saw somebody doing a miracle in your name. And the reason we ran him out of town is because he wasn't with the right clique. I bet somebody still don't see it. So let me tell you how it sounds to God. You see somebody casting out demons, something that you just flunked at 10 minutes ago. And the reason you want to shut them down is because he's doing it better than you. Somebody ought to help this preacher preach here. I don't even know where to start. Have you ever run into a person that get mad at other people, not because of their action, but because of their insecurity? It's like you can't do it, so you don't want nobody else to do it. And then you call yourself snitching on somebody, walking up to the office with the I'm telling face. I saw him doing that right there. You only mad because you couldn't do it. Don't miss the sermon. John's problem was not the man's action, because the action wasn't a bad thing. John's problem was the man's association. Why? Because he was not with us. I'm telling you, a hit dog will holler every time. Because he was so insecure, because he knew they had just failed a few minutes ago. And now you won't shut this man down because he ain't with y'all. There are people in the world who will try to shut you down simply because you're not with them. Talk to me here. As if they're the only ones that can do something. As if they're the only ones that can make stuff happen. As if they're the only ones that have power. And they'll kill you for trying to come up. I wish you had some experience in what I'm talking about. That's how I know some church folk are crazy, because we actually believe that Jesus is for us only. As if somehow your neighbor can't be blessed just like you are. As if God don't visit my house just like he visit your house. We think Jesus is all about us, just us church and us denomination, our way, our tradition. Anything outside of that, it must be evil because it ain't from us. The issue, I'm going to get even more specific. The issue wasn't the action. They had a problem with the man's association. And I think we miss out as a community when we limit ourselves to these cliques. I think the church misses out. I think the community misses out. I think we as family, we miss out when we click up with one another and we'll try to demonize everybody else. Churches can't work together. Preachers walking around jealous of each other. Can't celebrate nobody. Can't come together in the community. I have begged people to come help us to help somebody, but because I'm doing it. Because God forbid if somebody else get the credit other than us. See how quiet it got right up in there? While you hating on this outsider, you better be glad Jesus didn't replace y'all with him. Because like I told you, clearly y'all couldn't get it done. It only took one of him to do what 12 disciples couldn't get done. Sometimes we just better be glad that God keeps us around, because we are ineffective at times and God still holds us in there. Sometimes folk do a better job and they get less money than we do. You better thank God for that little check you're getting, because some of us don't deserve the check we already got. Some of us better thank our heavenly stars for the Lord blessing us in spite of ourselves. Be careful about digging ditches for people. Be careful about trying to get rid of people, because it may just shine a light on your inadequacy. Like I wasn't even thinking about it before, but now that I look at you, you really haven't been doing that good of a job. You sitting here ratting on somebody. I ain't even think about the fact that you really don't never come on time. I wish I had somebody in here who would look back over your journey and thank God just for keeping you around. I'm just about ready to close here. because I don't want this sermon to get cut in the wrong place here. So I got a 30-minute window I got to work with here. Let me tell you what I learned over the years. I've learned that you have to be careful about demonizing people who are different. I had to learn this. The Lord had to deliver me from some stuff, because some of us have it in our mind that anything different is from the devil. People who are not like us. People who are not part of us. Just because somebody's different don't mean they deserve to be demonized. I had to learn that. I had to be delivered from some of my own personal prejudices. And even now, when you do hear me criticize certain people, my criticism is not necessarily behavioral. My criticism is always biblical. Let me go from the outside and then work my way on the inside. There's this term called American exceptionalism. And it's a term that was created as if to suggest that America is the greatest place in the world to live and everybody else is evil. It gotten so bad now to where now you are conditioned as an American. Every time you hear the word Islam, every time you hear the word Muslim, every time you hear anything other than something that is American made, you immediately begin to think that those people are demons. They're different, but they're not necessarily demonic. We ain't gonna agree on Jesus Christ, and that's something they'll have to deal with in the judgment. But in the meantime, don't demonize folk just because they're not like you. If we're talking about religion, that's one argument. But just to look at a person that may have their head wrapped, or look at a person whose skin may be darker, or to look at a person whose accent may be different than yours, that's not enough reason for you to demonize somebody, because I know some Christians that's full of hell. You need to hear me, because this will help you understand me as your pastor a whole lot better. You need to know how I'm wired so you know how to come at me right. When you hear me going hard on these churches and some of these preachers, it's not because they're different. My issue with people is doctrine. Not behavioral, biblical. Not different, doctrine. In other words, I learned a long time ago, nobody does church the same way we do. Somebody ought to talk to me here. There's a church going on right now across the street from here. They do church differently than we do. And that difference does not make them demonic. You got to learn what I'm talking about. You got Baptist churches that operate different from each other. Every denomination has its own unique characteristics. Hear me now. Which way is it? Bethel AME? New Mount Zion, AME, same denomination. I promise you, two different styles of worship. Their worship services look different. They feel different. Both of them are my comrades, so I can make commentary on this. I know both of them, and it's not to say that one is better than the other. It's just a matter of personal preference. It's not that either one is better. They're just different. Tabernacle and Jacob Chapel, just different. Bethel Baptist and Jacob Chapel, we just different. But the problem we run into, the problem with us, is when we start making comparisons and then try to demonize people who are different as if our way is the only way. My issue is not behavioral. My issue is biblical. I don't care if you have communion on the first Sunday or the third Sunday. I don't care if you do it in the morning or in the evening. Jesus said, as often as you do it. You can do it every Sunday. You can do it every day if you want to. As often as you do it. Jesus said, do it in remembrance of me. I don't care if you shout for 45 minutes. Stay in church all night like them Pentecostal folk do. I don't care. The issue that I have is not with your behavior, it's with what's biblical. Come here, don't go nowhere. If you're going to speak in tongues, The Bible said somebody ought to understand you. I ain't got no issue with people that decide to do it, but the Bible said that if everybody in here speak English, then this other language you talking obviously is not profitable for the congregation. Seem to me like if I'm talking, you would want to understand me, right? So that everybody can leave here edified. Ain't no sense in you cutting a little shata if can't nobody understand what it is you saying. If you talking to God, then you talk to him for yourself. If you talking in your secret closet, then don't open the door while you in worship service. I ain't talking about your behavior. I'm talking about the Bible. So I was talking to Jesus. Well, why did we hear you then? That's biblical. That's where my issue comes with churches. Because at this point, I don't care what you call yourself. At this point, I am so beyond the name on the marquee, but what I don't like is when folk try to come over here and impose their stuff on us. When we go other places, and I take y'all with me, we respect whatever happens in the house. I don't demonize nobody because they're different, even when there are times that folk have taken little shots at us while we're there. I respect the house, and I expect when you come here to respect my house. I asked my good friend sometime, Pastor Elwood down at New Mount Zion, I asked him, I'm like, man, when you gonna put a suit on? This is my friend, so I can talk to him like that. I'm like, man, when you gonna put a suit on? You'll be a little bit too hip-hop-ish with it. And he say, you want me to tell you how many folk joined the church today? What you gonna say? You can't argue with the result. I may not agree with the method. I won't ever do it. But guess what? Jesus said, if they ain't against us. I know it makes you uncomfortable. I know certain people come in here sometimes and you just wonder where in the world did they come from, and oh Lord, they sitting right up in the front. Oh Jesus, they coming in here with all that strange stuff. Oh Lord, who is this and why? Where did they come from? God said don't demonize folk because they not like you. Because who said that you always right? Who said that your way is necessarily the best way? We're always trying to figure out if what we're doing is right. If all we talking about is somebody being different, that's not enough to dismiss somebody. Because the fact of the matter is, you different. And Lord knows somebody put up with you. Have I got a witness here? You go to other countries, they worship God totally different than we do. You need to get some exposure. You need to get outside of your little box of what you think church is. They look different than us. They don't dress like us. The style of preaching is different, but we can't afford to demonize them just because they're different. You gotta learn how to get over yourself. Because what I'm learning is that none of us have a corner on Christ. You may roll up in some church and you be like, man, this church dead. This church boring. This church ain't got this and ain't got that. Let me tell you something. I start every Sunday morning, 6 a.m. with Charles Stanley. And he just as quiet as he can be. Sometimes he just sitting down in the chair talking to you, sipping coffee. He just as calm as he can be. But when I tell you that it strengthens me, because if you know the word, it don't matter about style points. Anybody can preach to you when you know the word for yourself. Anybody can feed you when you know what's in the Bible. Stop looking for everybody to sweat and swap spit at you all the time. Stop looking for somebody that got all the style points, because everything that glitters ain't God. None of us have a monopoly on good sense. There are people that are out there doing legitimate kingdom work, and sometimes we throw them aside and we demonize them just like John tried to do, all because they're not with us. I heard a preacher on the radio, Buck, the other week, a few months ago actually, He was talking about the importance of being baptized. It was your son, Buck, Jesse Sanders. And I mean, he just preaching in the studio by himself. Just on the radio, going in. You could hear him sweating. You could just hear the power of God. Just talking about how everybody need to be baptized in the name of the Lord. Then at the end of the broadcast, he invited everybody to join him at this public area where he was going to be baptized. Now, he the pastor of a church, but he decided to go outside the walls of the church and baptize some folk in the streets. You might say that's different. I might say that's different. Some people may frown upon that, but the Great Commission says, go into all the world and make disciples out of every creature, baptizing them. If that man has been ordained in the gospel ministry, who am I to criticize that he want to baptize? So I called him up. I was like, Doc, how'd the baptism go? He said, it was awesome. We're looking forward to doing it again. I wish more Christians would get off the pew and go help save some soul. We always so quick to demon of it. What they doing over there? Hey? But then you gonna baptize folk? You gonna baptize folk over there in the pool in Frenchtown? Who in the world does that? You supposed to take them to the church and be baptized. Where's that in the Bible? Your grandma was baptized in the creek with the snakes and the gators and the turtles snapping at her, and the Lord kept them old people safe. Don't tell me that your way is the only way. We had kids at the summer camp baptizing each other in the pool. Because they done seen it at church, and I'm telling you, it was my son that was doing it. He just up there baptizing all in free in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. I said, boy, you can't be baptizing folk. You ain't no preacher. At summer camp, just and the children let him do it. What was my point? Jesus said, leave him alone. Stop being so petty in your position. Anybody that's not against us is for us. And you can't run them away just because they're not with us. Leave them alone. If they out there telling the truth, leave them alone. If souls are being saved, leave them alone. Help me here. If people's lives are being changed, if people are being touched, if people are out there witnessing on their job, if they sending encouraging messages, if they're praying for people on the streets, who are you to try to stop them? I'm not talking about these little pastors that be out in the pew. Could we have a little bit of that goes on sometimes? I'm talking about people that just love Jesus just like you do. How can you demonize somebody just because they different? Maybe if you did more for Jesus, it wouldn't bother you so much when other people try to do it. You wouldn't be trying to police people from the pew. How many demons have you cast out? Talk to me here. How many families have you helped? How many souls have come to Christ on your testimony? Don't hate the doers just because you as a disciple are dysfunctional. God told me to tell you as I close, we got bigger fish to fry than some of this petty stuff we worry about in church. Where you sit and what position you in and what we call you and what your title is. Get over yourself. We got bigger fish to fry than that. We got to understand that if you love the name of Jesus and you're willing to follow, I don't care what color you are. I don't care what clique you are part of. Meet me in the streets and let's change some lives together. Can anybody help me close this message here? We got families that are falling apart. We need need to come together. We got young boys that need mentoring. I need men to stand up and be men. We got young girls with self-esteem issues. We need somebody other than just the mothers to step up and help these girls. We fighting over which preacher stole our members. We fighting over who gets the glory. And in the meantime, the drugs are taking our streets. Come on and help me here. The pimps are in your middle schools. Crime is going up and graduation is going down. And we fighting over who gonna be the choir president. We fighting over who gonna be the usher board leader. We fighting over who gonna call our name. I don't know who's listening to me, but God said there's a problem within us. And if you need a standard to measure somebody by, let me tell you how you ought to judge somebody. Jesus said you'll know a tree by the fruit that it bears. And if they doing the Lord's work, tell your neighbor, leave them alone. Can I get a witness here? You'll know a tree just by looking at its fruit. And the best fruit I can think of is the fruit of the Spirit. If they got a loving heart, tell your neighbor, that's God. If they're humble spirits, that's God. If they know how to be patient, that's God. If they believe in second chances, that's God. If they're not greedy, that's God. If they're not boastful, if they have compassion, if they take in strangers, tell your neighbor, that's what God looks like. Can I get a witness here? Because at the end of the day, God needs some soldiers. And I'm so glad that all of the soldiers don't have to be in the army. We got some Marine soldiers. We got some Air Force soldiers. We got some Navy soldiers. We got some white soldiers. We got some colored soldiers. We got some Latino soldiers. We got some Asian soldiers. Is there anybody here made up your mind that you don't have to be with me, but as long as you love Jesus, that's enough for us to get together? Can I get a witness here? When I think about my Savior Jesus, there were sure enough some people that rejected Jesus because Jesus was not with them. They said, is this not the carpenter's son? They said, can anything good come out of Nazareth? But one Friday on a hill called Calvary, they took a peasant from the projects, gave him power to deliver the people. It was early one Friday morning. He took an outsider to bring me inside. He took a project baby and nailed him on a cross. He was wounded for my transgressions. He was bruised for my iniquities. But is there anybody here that know how the story ends? Tell your neighbor,